We are conditioned to believe that a cell phone is a lifeline, a digital anchor that connects us to safety when the physical world fractures. But on a dark May night in Minnesota, a cell phone became a recording device for a forensic impossibility. 19-year-old college student Brandon Swanson was driving home on rural roads. He took a wrong turn, and his Chevy Lumina slipped into a shallow ditch. He was not injured. He was completely calm. He dialed his parents, and for 47 minutes, he talked to his father while walking through the pitch-black fields to find a nearby town. 47 minutes of normal, rational conversation. But at exactly 2 a.m., Brandon stopped mid-sentence. He told his father he could hear running water nearby. Then, without warning, he uttered two final words: "Oh shit." The line stayed open, but Brandon was gone. He evaporated into the Texas-sized void of the Minnesota plains within a single second. Major media outlets and the local police quickly closed this case, wrapping it in a comforting narrative of a tragic accident. They claim Brandon simply fell into the Yellow Medicine River in the dark and drowned. A lazy explanation for a complex puzzle. Welcome to Behind the Lie, where we look at the suppressed forensics, not the sanitized press releases. Here is the first shocking detail the big channels prefer to ignore. Forensic measurements from that exact night prove the river was only 40 centimeters deep. It was knee-high to an adult male, with almost zero current. To accidentally drown there is a physical absurdity. Furthermore, search teams used sonar and dragged the entire riverbed multiple times. They found no body, no clothes, and not a single item belonging to Brandon. But the most terrifying piece of evidence is the digital trail. If Brandon fell into the water, his cell phone would instantly short-circuit, killing the signal. But police logs reveal that Brandon's phone remained turned on and actively pinged a cell tower in Clarkfield for several hours after the call abruptly ended. The ping was completely stationary, coming from dry land in the middle of a field. Someone or something kept that phone alive on the grass while Brandon was already gone. So, we are left with those two unsettling facts I just mentioned. A river too shallow to swallow a man without a trace, and a phone that refused to shut off. But right at this moment, investigators hit a third wall, one that defies all logic. When cell tower data finally came back, detectives stared at the maps in absolute disbelief. The whole time Brandon was on the phone with his dad, he was completely certain he was looking at the city lights of Lind, Minnesota. His parents spent hours driving up and down that specific area, flashing their headlights. But the tower pings told a terrifying truth. Brandon wasn't even close. His 2001 Chevy Lumina was ditched in a gravel incline just off a field near Taunton, Minnesota. That is 25 miles in the exact opposite direction. Let that sink in. How does a perfectly sober, local 19-year-old college student mistake his location by 25 miles in an area he drove through all the time? Sure, it was pitch black, but not that pitch black. Brandon was walking toward distinct lights. If it wasn't the town of Lind, what exactly was this disoriented kid staring at in the dead of night? Local farmers in Lincoln County know a dark secret that the official police reports left out. The lights Brandon was tracking that night might have belonged to something no one in their right mind would ever want to approach after dark. Let's re-examine the single most famous moment of this case. The chilling final seconds of that infamous 47-minute phone call. If you search for this story online, 99% of the articles will tell you the exact same thing. Brandon suddenly yells, "Oh shit," and the line instantly cuts to black. Case closed. But that is a massive misconception, a narrative mistake that has actively derailed public perception of this mystery for nearly 2 decades. Most people assume the cell phone was crushed, dropped into deep water, or immediately destroyed. But Brandon's mother, Annette Swanson, later corrected the record with a detail that changes everything. When Brandon fell silent, the call did not disconnect. The signal wasn't lost. Brian Swanson stayed on that open line. He did not hang up. He refused to press end. For hours, Brandon's father kept screaming into his receiver, "Brandon, Brandon, can you hear me?" And what did he get in return? Not the sound of a violent struggle, not the heavy splashing of a man drowning in a rushing river, just an eerie, hollow silence. But it wasn't a deadline. As Brian stood in the dark, miles away, his speaker played the distinct rhythmic sound of heavy wind rushing directly past the phone's microphone. And beneath the wind, he could hear something else. The faint, unmistakable sound of footsteps dragging through dry brush. Think about the physical reality of that moment. The phone was intact. It was operational. It was either still clutched in Brandon's hand, or it was resting right there in the dirt, completely dry. If Brandon had stepped into a deep pool of water, that microphone would have captured gasping, coughing, or desperate splashing. But there was nothing. Brandon simply stopped speaking. It was as if something or someone instantly cut off his ability to make a sound before he could even drop the phone. But the mystery of the open line goes even deeper. Years after the disappearance, independent audio forensic specialists took the metadata and the reported acoustics of that final night and attempted to isolate the ambient background noise. They wanted to know if Brian's ears had missed something buried deep within the low-frequency static, and what their theories suggest is enough to make your skin crawl. Some experts believe that beneath the sound of the wind, there was a secondary acoustic signature, a faint metallic click followed by a low mechanical hum in the distance, the kind of sound you only hear near running farm machinery or an idling diesel engine. If this is true, it shatters the theory of a lonely natural accident. It means that when Brandon yelled his final words, he wasn't looking at empty space. He was looking directly at an immediate human threat, which leads us to the most terrifying question of all. If Brandon was taken by force right next to his own phone, why did the predator leave the device behind, actively transmitting a signal that would lead the police straight to their doorstep? The missing person investigation for Brandon Swanson instantly evolved into one of the most intense, grueling search operations the state of Minnesota had ever witnessed. We are talking about hundreds of volunteers, state police forces, thermal imaging helicopters, and specialized K-9 units completely tearing up the rural landscape. Every single square inch of the terrain surrounding his abandoned vehicle was scrutinized. And that is exactly when the official narrative takes a sharp, deeply unsettling turn. Investigators brought in elite police bloodhounds, dogs legendary for their near superhuman ability to track a specific human scent profile days after a disappearance. The handlers presented the hounds with an article of Brandon's clothing, and the lead dog immediately locked on. It picked up a hot trail right from the driver's seat of the ditched Chevy Lumina. The bloodhound didn't just wander aimlessly, it moved with absolute terrifying certainty. The dog led handlers out of the gravel ditch, straight through the muddy agricultural fields, heading directly toward the banks of the Yellow Medicine River. Now, if Brandon had stumbled in the dark and drowned right after his final words, this is where the story should have ended. The dog's trail should have stopped at the water's edge, but it didn't. To the absolute shock of the search team, the lead hound lunged into the freezing current, crossed over to the northern bank, and kept tracking. The dog proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Brandon did not die in that river. He survived the water crossing. He scrambled up the muddy bank, completely drenched in freezing spring temperatures, and kept walking deeper into the dark. The K-9 followed Brandon's steps for nearly 3 miles, moving along a specific path through the fields, all the way until it reached a remote gravel agricultural road. And right there, at an isolated intersection, the scent trail didn't fade away. It vanished instantly, as if Brandon had evaporated into thin air. In the language of criminal profiling and search and rescue analytics, an abrupt, total loss of scent on a solid road point to only one logical conclusion. The individual left the ground. Brandon didn't walk past that point. He didn't crawl into the ditch. He stepped inside a vehicle. But consider the cold reality of southwestern Minnesota at 3 in the morning. Taunton is a ghost town with a population of less than 150 people. Who on earth was driving down a dead-end, unlit gravel road at that exact hour, waiting to pick up a freezing, lost college student? To truly understand what might have happened to Brandon Swanson after his scent vanished from that gravel road, you have to understand the unwritten cultural architecture of rural America, especially in isolated Midwestern agricultural belts like Leon and Lincoln counties. There is an old, uncompromising mindset out here: get off my lawn. In these deeply isolated communities, property owners don't always dial 911 when they detect a prowler or see strange movement on their land in the dead of night. They deal with it themselves. They grab a shotgun. Remember, Brandon was completely blind in the dark, entirely disoriented. He explicitly told his father he was climbing over fences, cutting directly through private pastures, and navigating around agricultural structures. He was trespassing without even knowing it. Imagine a paranoid or protective property owner waking up at 3 in the morning to the sound of breaking branches and rustling brush right outside his window. He sees a shadowy figure moving toward his outbuildings. In a split second of panic, a trigger is pulled. A fatal mistake is made, and an innocent 19-year-old kid drops to the ground. Once the adrenaline fades, the shooter realizes exactly what he has done. He didn't stop a criminal, he just ended the life of a lost college student. In that moment of pure terror, a desperate cover-up begins. This chilling scenario completely explains why nearly 2 decades of intensive ground grid searches, advanced sonar operations, and cadaver dog deployments have failed to yield a single piece of physical evidence. No jacket, no keys, no body. He wasn't left in a field. He could have been hidden inside a sealed vertical water well, buried beneath fresh barn concrete, or lost forever in an industrial grain silo. But if this was a cold-blooded cover-up on private property, it forces us to confront a massive paradox, a loophole that still breaks the brains of criminal profilers. If an attacker killed Brandon and hid his body, why on earth didn't they destroy his cell phone? As we established earlier, Brandon's mobile device remained completely functional. It did not go dark. It didn't lose battery. The network provider continued to receive active, clean pings from Brandon's exact number for an additional 48 hours after he vanished. Those pings were transmitting from a specific geographic sector that local authorities theoretically mapped out. Yet, no one ever found the physical device. Which means either the phone was thrown into a location that completely masked it from search parties, or the killer intentionally left it powered on to misdirect the entire police investigation. But what if the phone wasn't left behind by accident? What if the active signal was a deliberate breadcrumb trail, leading search teams away from the real crime scene and hiding a secret that sits right under the town's nose to this very day? The vanishing of Brandon Swanson didn't just leave behind a trail of cold questions. It fundamentally shattered and rewrote the legal architecture of American law enforcement. On that agonizing May morning, when his terrified parents first begged local police to launch an immediate tactical search, they were met with cold, bureaucratic rejection. Because Brandon was 19, the dispatchers told them, he's an adult. He has a constitutional right to go missing. Wait 48 hours. Because of that archaic, broken protocol, the single most critical window of the search, the hours when his scent was fresh and his phone was actively transmitting, was completely lost to red tape. Refusing to let another family suffer the same systemic failure, the Swansons fought an aggressive legal battle, successfully passing Brandon's law in Minnesota. Today, because of their sacrifice, police are legally mandated to launch an immediate missing persons investigation for any adult under dangerous conditions. Brandon's tragedy went on to save thousands of American lives, but his own case remains frozen in amber. Nearly 2 decades have passed since that fateful, freezing night in 2008. And every single evening, without a single exception, Annette and Brian Swanson flip on the front porch light of their home. It is a quiet, heartbreaking ritual. They are still holding on to the impossible hope that Brandon will finally walk out of the dark fields he lost his way in so long ago. But as the years turn into decades, the fields remain completely silent. The physical reality of this case is terrifying. A human being cannot simply dissolve. Somewhere out there, in a radius of just a few miles from that gravel road, lies the definitive answer to what happened after he shouted those final words into his father's ear. Was he swallowed by a natural anomaly that hundreds of specialized search dogs somehow missed? Or did he stumble directly into a human trap that was waiting for him in the dark? The mystery of Brandon Swanson remains one of the most polarizing and deeply disturbing cold cases in American true crime history. A puzzle where every single piece of evidence actively contradicts the next. And now, I want to turn the case file over to you. What truly happened in those final, chaotic seconds of that 47-minute phone call? Did the harsh landscape of rural Minnesota claim a disoriented traveler? Or did Brandon walk face first into the perfect, covered-up crime? Drop your theories in the comments below. If this deep dive kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming investigations into the world's most terrifying unsolved mysteries. Stay safe out there, keep looking for the truth, and I will see you in the next one.